We are doing a list video on our top 5 vehicles that are going to be available to import now that it's the end of the year and coming into 2024. 1999 vehicles are going to be 25 years old.
Yeah, and obviously this depends heavily on the exact manufacturer date. So just because it's going to be 2024 doesn't mean all 1999 cars are eligible right out of the gate. You got to pay attention to those manufacturer dates. But every vehicle we have on our list here is a vehicle that debuted as a 1999 model. And so these are all cars that are fresh that previously you could not import, that because it is now going to be 2024, you can import them.
Now let's start off with number 5 on our list. This is the Mitsubishi Lancer Evo 6. So this is the last generation of Evo that we didn't get here in the US.
Yeah, and I actually think that this is probably going to be my favorite generation of Evo.
Yeah.
They look really cool. They have a 2-liter 4-cylinder turbos that are, I mean, they're pretty legendary, right? They say they put out about 276 horsepower. This was back during the Gentleman's Agreement back in Japan, where pretty much every high horsepower car was saying 276, when we all knew that it was putting out quite a bit more.
Another thing I like about these is that they're 5-speed manual only, which is really the only way that you would want to have one of them configured. And for these Evo 6s, they had a larger intercooler, a larger oil cooler, new pistons over previous models. You also have titanium aluminide turbine wheels for the RS model, which was pretty cool. That was the first in a production car.
Yeah, and of course these used their all-wheel drive system because these things were known to be rally monsters, right? And they're pretty affordable too. I mean, it's not a cheap car by any means, but you can get one of these for as little as $15,000. Now, granted, all the prices we're going to be talking about today are before you pay for shipping it over to the US and getting all the importation fees and documents and all of that stuff done, because that's going to depend on where you're shipping it from, where you're shipping it to, and who you're using to get everything done with. But think about it this way: you get a really cool car that not many other people have seen on the road for 15 grand.
Yeah,
not bad.
It is a really cool car, and 15 grand is on the very low end. We saw some that were going for more around the $60,000 range, so there's a pretty big span there that the prices live in. But let's talk about number 4 on our list. This is the Audi S3.
Yeah, so we didn't want to keep it to only Japanese vehicles. We wanted to switch it up a little bit and get a European car in there. And this is basically kind of like the Audi version of the Volkswagen GTI. So you're getting like a GTI in a tuxedo, and these only came as a 3-door hatchback with that 1.8 liter turbo 4-cylinder, putting out about 207 horsepower to the front wheels.
Yeah, and this is actually the first time that Audi labeled a 4-cylinder car with their S designation. So it's a pretty interesting little hot hatch, and they labeled these as Quattros, but really it's a holodeck all-wheel drive system, kind of like what you get in a lot of other Volkswagen products. It's a pretty common all-wheel drive system. It's not strictly Audi's classic Quattro system.
Yeah, and I did say front-wheel drive, and I didn't say that by mistake, because in reality, the vast majority of the time that you're driving this car, it is a front-wheel drive hot hatch. And then those rear wheels only engage when they start to notice some sort of slip, unlike the traditional Quattro system, which is a full 50-50 split. So it's not quite as exciting as that Quattro system. Look at it as more of like a fun hot hatch that can also send the power to those rear wheels. But I mean, you could pick these up in Europe, Japan, Mexico, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. Pretty much everyone but us got this car. So there's a lot of different places that you can import these from.
Exactly. You should be able to find them a lot of different places, and there's generally a pretty good availability of ones that aren't that expensive. Around $5,000 to $10,000, we saw a fair amount.
Yeah, and I think that to have like a fun hot hatch, that's a pretty good option. But first 2 cars have been kind of performance-oriented. Let's switch things up and go with a luxury cruiser for the third one.
Yeah, so for number 3, this is something that's probably a little bit more Brendan style because you love these big luxury cars. This is the Hyundai Equus. So this was a really competitor to the Mercedes S-Class.
Yeah, so many of you out there may think, oh, well, didn't we get the Equus? And you'd be right, we did, but we got the second generation of Equus. This is the first generation of Equus, where Hyundai partnered with Mitsubishi to build their first ever like full-size luxury vehicle because they wanted to compete with that Mercedes S-Class and BMW 7 Series out in the Korean market. And in fact, they also sold this in China as well as some parts of the Middle East. Now, unlike the second generation Equus, this was front-wheel drive based, but it's still a pretty cool car, I think.
Yeah, and you could get a few different powertrain options. They had both a V6 and a V8. And yeah, it was front-wheel drive, which is not unheard of in a luxury car. It's maybe not everyone's first choice when they're picking an enthusiast car to have, even in the luxury segment. But they also sold these as an extended wheelbase limousine, that version of it.
Yeah, I think that'd be pretty cool to bring over a Korean limousine. But I mean, these had some really cool high-tech features. Like in the back seat, rather than giving you leg extenders that extend out underneath your leg, they actually gave you the option to pull down the center of the seat in front of you where you could stick your feet straight through the seat and it's sitting on the front passenger seat to lay completely flat in the car. And not only that, but you had like a TV in the back seat area as well as front and rear heated seats.
Yeah, so a lot of nice features on them, especially considering that you can find some of these for $5,000 or less.
Yeah, I even saw a company out there that had one, and this was very tempting, that had one completely landed in Baltimore, paperwork registered, shipped over for $6,500, and that only had like 132,000 kilometers on it. So we're talking less than 100,000 mile luxury sedan that no one else has for like $6,500. Sign me up.
That's a pretty unique vehicle to have for that amount of money, and pretty cool that you're already starting to see some of them make their way over here because, of course, when a model year vehicle comes out, it's usually manufactured starting before that model year is actually the year that it is. So some of these vehicles should be showing up.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need to give you guys something. I wanted to really give you guys something like a true off-roader, right? Because I know that not all of you out there want sports cars or front-wheel drive luxury sedans. So I was trying really hard to find a 4x4 car or 4x4 SUV or whatever that we didn't get here in the States, and there really wasn't one except for this interesting vehicle, the Honda HR-V. And yeah, you may be thinking, well, we did get the HR-V, but again, like the Equus, we didn't get the first gen.
Yeah, and this is probably the most interesting HR-V, if you can't tell just by the way that it looks. It's got very boxy appearance. It's got this funky wing on the rear. It's actually a pretty cool looking vehicle, and it's also got some really nice features. So these came in front wheel drive, but you could also get it with real-time all-wheel drive, kind of like what you saw on older CR-Vs. And it's a pretty interesting system that the four-wheel drive works from.
Yeah, so it uses like a dual hydraulic pump in the rear differential, where the four-wheel drive system is basically hydraulically actuated when those front wheels lose traction. So it's not just this electronic nanny system.
Right.
It's actually like a mechanical all-wheel drive system, which I think is pretty darn cool, especially given how funky the car looks.
Yeah, and speaking of mechanical, you could also get these with a 5-speed manual, which is the way to go because your other option is a CVT. Definitely the manual is a lot cooler. The other thing that makes these much cooler is the 3-door version. There's also a 5-door, but looking at this 3-door just kind of completes the look, for me at least.
Absolutely. And keep in mind, these are not very powerful vehicles. The base engine is only a 1.6-liter 4-cylinder pumping out 103 horsepower, but they did give you the option of VTEC, where it bumped it up to 123 horsepower.
Yeah, which is still not a boatload of power, but I don't think anyone would be buying a first-gen HR-V for the power. And this is another vehicle that we saw for around about $5,000 or less.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for the amount of money that you'd spend to get something, I mean, even landed here for 10 grand, something that no one has seen on the road, it's kind of hard. I mean, you'd be the only one at your local Cars and Coffee showing up in a first-gen HR-V.
Yeah, would be pretty cool, especially in this kind of green color that they had them in.
Yeah.
But now finally for number one on our list, this is a vehicle that's a big deal. This is the Nissan Silvia, specifically the S15, which is a really cool version of the Silvia. It's possibly the most sought after version, depending on who you ask. But yeah, this is one that we never got here in the States, and I think it's a car that people are going to be pretty excited to be able to get their hands on.
Yeah, I think these cars look fantastic. The lines on them are simple yet elegant and beautiful. And this, of course, had the legendary SR20 DET engine that everybody loves to put in their tuner cars because they are just super robust, very reliable, and have a huge aftermarket community. But not only that, but these S15s are known to be more comfortable than the S13s and the S14s that came before it. So us Americans with our wider proportions are going to fit in this a little bit easier than we will in an earlier one.
And the other thing about these cars is obviously they're huge tuner cars, and that opens up that for people to do here in the States, which is really cool. But there's also some pretty interesting factory versions of these cars, like the Spec R, which added a number of things like turbo, 6-speed manual that bumped the power up to 247 horsepower from the factory, which is pretty impressive for a car this size.
Yeah.
And the Spec R also got a bunch of chassis upgrades, suspension upgrades, stiffer anti-roll bars, strut braces. It's a pretty cool vehicle that you can get, even if you don't plan on doing any modification. If you could find one of those Spec Rs, be pretty badass.
Yeah, now you can get some of the entry-level ones where they don't have the turbo. They still put out about 163 horsepower and still a plenty fun vehicle to drive. You can find those for around about $20,000 before importing it. The Spec Rs, you're probably going to add about a $5,000 to $10,000 premium over the entry levels, though, just to get that turbo and the extra sportiness that comes with it.
Yeah, and you know, this is definitely the more expensive vehicle that we have here in our list, but it's one that obviously we had to mention because it's a pretty big deal vehicle. And we also have a bonus car on this list after number one because we wanted to focus mostly on relatively affordable cars. Of course, we have to mention the R34 GTR. Those are not affordable, but it's a huge deal that those are now going to be importable because kind of like the S15, the R34 is the GTR that most people want.
Yeah, absolutely. So the 10th generation Skyline, which is what this GTR is based on, actually came out in 1998. So you could have been importing this for a while, but that GTR didn't come out until 1999. So they are just now about to be able to be imported. And I have heard that there have been people that have been storing them in warehouses for years in Japan, waiting for this day to finally come. So you are going to finally start to see, I think, a flood of R34 GTRs in the US. And here's the thing, guys. This is a six-figure car, much like the Toyota Supra nowadays is a six-figure car. Even buying this out in Japan, the cheapest ones out there are six figures, and there are some even going for close to seven figures for really nice, really rare examples of them.
Yeah, which is insane. I mean, as we all know, over the last couple of years, there's just been an explosion in this category of cars, some of the Japanese icon sports cars, and yeah, this is obviously no different. It's a huge deal that they're becoming available. It's unobtainium for any of us, but still cool that we'll be able to go to some of our local car shows and actually be able to see them up close here in the States. That's going to be awesome. These were badass cars when they were new. It's another one of those that was rated at 276 horsepower, but they were known to actually make a lot more power than that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, some people are saying that they were generally about 350-ish kind of horsepower is what some people were dynoing them at in Japan. So certainly an underrated car, but I mean, what these are mostly known for is their tunability, where people are tuning these up over like 1,000 horsepower. And that is kind of where they got their legendary status when these things just became unbeatable on the track.
Yeah, they're rad cars. There's a reason that they're going to be going for a lot of money. Now, there's also a few honorable mentions that we wanted to bring up. We're not going to go into a ton of detail, but a few other vehicles to look out for, one of which I like is the Daihatsu Naked, which is not a car I think that's maybe on anyone's mind specifically, but it is a pretty cool, boxy little K car.
Yeah, and I put it on this list just so I could hear you say the Daihatsu Naked.
Yeah.
Just so you could go around saying you're driving a Daihatsu Naked. It's kind of an interesting name for a car, certainly, but...
It is. There's some funky K car names out there.
Yeah, and this isn't the only funky K car. There are a ton of cool K cars out there. This list could go on forever if I start listing all the interesting K cars that are out there. But some of the other ones that are kind of unobtainium but are hitting that 1999 cutoff is like the Pagani Zonda. 1999 was the first year for that. Now that again, the vast majority of you out there watching this are not going to be able to afford that car along with us.
Either, yep.
Yeah, but some of you lucky ones out there are going to get one, I'm sure.
Also the Ultima GTR and a TVR Tuscan Speed 6. So, there's a few vehicles that we would be pretty excited to see out here in the States. Let us know down in the comments below what vehicles specifically are you looking forward to, because there's probably plenty of people here in the comments that have a particular K car or something in mind that they know is going to become available soon that we didn't cover in this list. So let us know.
Yeah, I'm just excited that we can finally say that pretty much all of the cars we never got in the 90s will finally be available by the end of 2024, because you can import them all. They'll all be over 25 years old. But I thought you guys might enjoy this list. I hope you sure did. Either way, let us know in the comments section below. And thank you so much for watching.
Yeah.
Take care.